Hi everyone, and welcome to Health Law. I'm really excited to be teaching Health Law again this fall, and I hope you're excited to take it. I know some of you have been waiting for this class. Sorry I can't be there for the first class. I'm away at a conference. But what I thought I'd do, rather than review the syllabus on the 11th when we first meet in person, I would do that all now by video, and then we can jump straight into the materials on the 11th. So that's what we're going to do. I'm going to begin by introducing myself. I know, particularly because I was on sabbatical last year, a lot of you don't know me. My name is Hilary Young. I'm originally from Halifax, and I went to law school at the University of Ottawa as a mature student. And I loved law school, and it was there that I first started to learn about health law. I took a course there on reproductive legal issues, and did some research assistance for a professor who was interested in, among other things, health privacy. So that's where I first became interested in health law. After law school, I clerked at the Supreme Court of Canada with Justice Louis Lebel, and I worked as an articled clerk and then eventually an associate at Cox & Palmer in Halifax. And at Cox & Palmer, I got to work on CMPA files. The CMPA is the Canadian Medical Protective Association, and it's the body that effectively acts as an insurer for doctors. It's not technically insurance, but they're the ones who will defend lawyers when they're sued and who will represent them in professional misconduct matters, for example. So I got to work on some of those files and really enjoyed the work. I really found the issues interesting. So that was another reason why I became really interested in health law. Then after leaving Cox & Palmer, I did an LLM, and there I did my thesis on a health law related issue, so I really started to develop some academic expertise. And today, although my primary research area is defamation law, I still do try to keep abreast of health law legal issues, and particularly around informed consent, end-of-life legal issues, substitute decision-making, those kinds of things. And I wrote an article about a case called Razuli, which we will eventually study, that was cited by the Supreme Court on an issue related to informed consent. So I've got some health law scholarship that I've done. In terms of my teaching style, I've been told that I can be kind of scary, but I'd like to think that I'm approachable. I'm certainly happy to meet with any of you to talk about issues related to what we're talking about in class, or about other issues, including law school related issues, clerkships, that sort of thing, or anything else for that matter. My office hours are posted in the syllabus, but you're always welcome to make an appointment with me at another time. So I have all the time in the world for students who want to further their learning. So I hope you'll take advantage of that. I do expect people to come to class prepared. I think it's a waste of everyone's time to simply review the readings in class. If everyone comes prepared, we'll be able to actually get into some really interesting discussions and debates, but we can't do that if you don't yet know what the relevant law is. So I hope you will take that seriously. I tend not to give extremely onerous readings in the sense that the page count is, I don't think, ever more than 50 pages, and usually quite a bit less. And I do that on purpose so that you can spend some time while reading to actually think about what you're reading. So all that to say that I hope you'll come to class prepared. I should note that I'm hard of hearing. I wear hearing aids in both ears. Usually it's not a problem, but you will probably find that I sometimes have to ask people to repeat themselves in class, particularly if they're sitting in the back. So you can sit up close, or you can repeat yourself, or you can speak loudly and clearly. But I thought I'd just make a mention of that so that you know to try to speak up. Before we get into the syllabus, I thought I'd say a few words about what health law actually is. I often get asked that question. People don't really know. They might know what constitutional law is or what contract law is, but they don't necessarily know what health law is. And health law is a different kind of law. It's not a kind of law in the way that administrative law or tort law is. It's a collection of rather disparate legal issues that all have health care or the health of Canadians in common. So obviously that can be quite broad. It used to be that when law schools first started offering courses in health law, the focus was really on medical malpractice, in other words, negligence, and to a lesser extent on the regulation of the healthcare professions. But now it's really quite a bit broader than that. We do talk about those things, of course, and negligence in quite a bit of detail, because it still is central to any course in health law. But we do talk quite a bit about a very wide range of things, which you can tell by just taking a quick look through the syllabus and seeing the topics we're going to cover. For example, we talk about how healthcare is funded in Canada and the legal obligations of the provincial and federal governments in relation to the provision of healthcare in Canada. So the dreaded federalism issues arise in health law. We talk about how healthcare is structured in terms of regional health authorities and hospitals and doctors and nurses, and who employs whom and how is that actually structured. We talk about medical decision making in terms of capacity and substitute decision making. So who has the ability to make their own healthcare decisions, and if they don't, who gets to make them for them, and what limitations are there on those substitute decisions. We will talk about constitutional entitlements to healthcare. Canadians tend to think that because we have a taxpayer-funded healthcare system, that we are legally entitled to healthcare in Canada, and the answer is actually quite a bit more complicated than that. We will look into cases where people have claimed a right to be given certain treatment, and it's not at all clear that Canadians have rights to treatment. Certainly not rights to any treatment. We will look at the regulation of the pharmaceutical industry, which obviously has huge implications for the health of Canadians and access to pharmaceuticals. We will look at human reproduction and legal issues related to that. So abortion may be the most obvious example of that. You probably know that abortion is no longer criminal in Canada, but there are lots of other laws surrounding abortion that affect access. There are laws around surrogacy and in vitro fertilization and other examples of assisted human reproduction, which we will look at. We will spend a bit of time, probably 2 classes, looking at end-of-life legal issues. Medical assistance in dying is a big one, but by no means the only one. We'll be looking at the rights to refuse medical treatment, even if that would lead to death. We will look at the ability to make advance directives, either deciding on one's medical treatment or naming someone else to make decisions for you. We'll look at mental health law and the very difficult issues that surround forced treatment of those with mental illness who don't want to be treated, and on the one hand wanting to respect their decision-making autonomy, and on the other hand wanting them to get the treatment that they need. Privacy is becoming an increasingly big issue in health law, particularly as so many health records are electronic now, but there are other health-related legal issues like what use can be made of genetic health information and confidentiality generally around health information. We'll talk about public health, which relates to laws or decisions that governments have to make in order to protect the public from getting sick. So when we had the SARS outbreak, for example, a number of public health laws were invoked. Another public health issue relates to vaccinations, particularly mandatory vaccinations of healthcare workers, which is in the interests of public health, but again raises issues of the autonomy of individuals to make their own treatment decisions. And last but certainly not least, we will talk about Indigenous healthcare issues, of which there are a number in Canada. So what I think I'll get you to do now is to sign up for the course on TWEN, if you haven't done that already. I guess if you're watching the video, you probably have. And find the syllabus and open the document, and I'm going to point out a few things. I'm certainly not going to read you the syllabus, but I will point out a few things in it. I guess before we get straight into the syllabus, I'll address the issue of laptops. You've probably heard over and over again now the research that shows just how bad laptops are for learning. And there are two reasons for this, really. One relates to how you take notes. So when you have a laptop, you tend to, you can type faster than you can handwrite, and therefore people tend to transcribe what they're hearing. Whereas if you have to handwrite your notes, you have to think about what is important, what out of what you're hearing is worth writing down, because you can't write down everything. As it turns out, this process of thinking about what's important and what to write down is incredibly important for learning. So I will encourage you to handwrite your notes for that reason. And if you're nervous about doing that, do it after the midterm when you don't have an exam in front of you, and perhaps you think the stakes as being smaller. The second reason why laptops are problematic for learning is simply the distraction factor. Studies have shown that they distract other people, and obviously they can distract you. I'm not immune to this. I find myself when I go to conferences that it's so easy to check your email or check Facebook, and before you know it, you're missing something important that's going on in front of you. So what I'm going to suggest there, what I do when I go to conferences and I don't want to be distracted by notifications or my emails or whatever, I turn the Wi-Fi off, and I strongly recommend that you do that in my class if you're going to use your laptop. Okay, so on to the syllabus. Let me just get my copy so I have it in front of me. The text, I have compiled a set of readings that are required. They should be available now at the bookstore, so please buy them. If for some reason they're not yet available at the bookstore, I'll make sure the first set of readings is posted on TWEN. The second thing to point out, I suppose, is the section on evaluations. This year I've decided to do a 50% midterm exam and a 50% research memo. The exam will be on October 16th. It'll be open book, it'll be in class, and I'll make more information available later, but essentially it will be covering the material to date. The research memo, it's worth 50%, but the research memo itself is not eligible for the JD writing requirement. That said, if you want to fulfill your JD writing requirement in health law, you may do that. So just read what the syllabus says about how doing that is different from writing the memo. Most of you will write the memo. If you want to write a paper, you can do that, and that can count. But you have to let me know by a certain date stated in the syllabus, and the requirements are somewhat different. So if you have any questions about that, feel free to ask. Feel free to come talk to me about the differences. And the memo or the paper, whichever you choose, will be due on the last day of classes. Again, I'll provide a lot more information along the way. I'll provide suggested topics. Academic integrity. I feel it's worth spending a little time talking about this because I take it very seriously. The onus is on you to make sure you understand the rules, to make sure you understand what constitutes plagiarism, to make sure you understand how to paraphrase or cite other sources. If you have any doubt about whether you're doing it correctly, just ask. You can avoid all sorts of trouble by simply asking. If you are tempted because you no longer have enough time to do a good job to cheat somehow on one of these assignments, I guess it'll be the memo, I strongly urge you not to do that. It's better to get a 0 and to fail the class than to be found to have cheated in law school. It will be very hard, not that hard to move past an F in a course. It is much harder to move past a notation on your transcript that says you committed an academic offense. Again, I urge you, if you're in the situation where you're tempted to cheat because you don't have time anymore, come see me. You won't necessarily get a penalty-free extension, but depending on the circumstances, we will arrange something, perhaps with a penalty, to give you more time. But I can't state strongly enough that it's just not worth it to commit an academic offense. That's true in undergrad. It's especially true in law school, where your reputation is so important and it will follow you. So again, if you have any questions about academic integrity, the last line I have under the academic integrity heading in the syllabus is, it's the student's responsibility to know the regulations. So if you're not familiar with them, review them. And again, when in doubt, come see me. I really don't want to have to deal with any academic integrity issues. But should it arise, I'm unlikely to be sympathetic, let's put it that way. Okay, so on that cheery note, I think we will leave it there until we meet on the 11th. To be clear, we are starting in on the first set of readings, which is the structure of the Canadian healthcare system, the Canada Health Act. By now you're probably used to skimming legislation. I don't want you to skim it too much, but with statutes like this you can generally skim the definitions, the purpose section, and focus in on what exactly it is that the Canada Health Act tries to do. When I was in law school, I always took notes from my readings, and it meant that I never had to go back to my books when I was studying for exams. So for example, here I would make a note of what specifically the Canada Health Act does, what the effect of it is. It's not an especially long act, so do pay a little attention to it. Next is Martha Jackman's article, Constitutional Jurisdiction over Health in Canada. And then two very brief readings from columnists by Andre Picard, who is the health columnist for the Globe and Mail. so each is only a couple of pages. So the readings, in fact, are not especially long, even though there are 4 separate readings. So do those readings, and then we will arrive together, we'll meet together on the 11th. Let me just confirm, in room 15 at 3:30. And we will talk about the structure of the Canadian healthcare system. And of course, if you have any questions about the course, about the syllabus, you can ask them then. If you're not sure whether you're going to keep taking the course, I recommend that you keep up with the readings, and that way it's easier to stay in the course if you decide to stay in the course, rather than trying to catch up. So if you have any questions that need to be answered before the 11th, obviously you can email me. My email address is hyoung@unb.ca. That information is in the syllabus as well. And otherwise you can just wait and ask in class on the 11th. So I'm really looking forward to meeting you all and to starting the Health Law course on September 11th. Take care.